In 1986, Gates introduced Microsoft Windows. It would become the company's signature program. Critics quickly noted that in its use of a mouse and icons, it bore more than a passing resemblance to the Apple Macintosh operating system, considered to be the most user-friendly.
If you know how to point, you already know how to use it. Macintosh. The computer for the rest of us.
Apple had given Gates full access to their technology while he was working on new software for the Macintosh computer. Gates advised Apple early on that they should license their software. But Apple was more interested in selling computers than software. They ignored. Apple had given Gates full access to their technology while he was working on new the suggestion. Once again, Gates took advantage of an opening and ran with it.
In this industry, we compete and we collaborate at the same time. Bill once had a conversation with me, says, you know, I'm a competitor, so even though I'm a friend, don't tell me information that you don't want me to use against you, because I'm going to compete with you, and if you tell me something that's useful in competing, I'm going to use that information.
Apple decided that Gates was not going to take a bite out of their business and threatened to sue over Windows. Gates, in turn, said he would withhold Microsoft software Apple desperately needed for its computers. In the end, Microsoft overpowered Apple in the courts.
Eventually, Microsoft prevailed by showing that even though there were similarities in the way that the two computers operated, each individual function of Windows was markedly different from each individual function of the Macintosh.
Even though the first version of Windows was far from perfect, it gave Microsoft a new financial and creative base. In 1986, Bill Gates took his company public. He held 45% of the stock, which made him a billionaire at the age of 31. Still, Gates never felt secure about the status of his company.
He doesn't want to fail. And when you have that kind of a fear, when you're always looking in your rearview mirror to see who might be, creeping up to do in Microsoft on a given day, it just consumes him, and it makes him certainly the most competitive human being in the personal computer industry. He's driven. It's white-hot intensity.
Gates was also gaining a reputation for being ruthless, and some powerful forces began to line up against him. Now that PCs had taken off, IBM chose to make a big push with its own operating system to replace DOS, which it licensed from Microsoft. It was called OS/2.
We were concerned whether we could weather the storm, so to speak, especially given the fact that this was a big storm. IBM, a very powerful company, a lot of software people, a lot of cash, a lot of resolve to potentially put Microsoft out of the operating system business.
Ironically, Microsoft played a role in developing OS/2. But Bill Gates was not about to abandon his own software. He decided to stake his company's future and his own reputation on the Windows software his team continued to upgrade, even if it meant losing IBM as his biggest customer. On May 22, 1990, Microsoft launched Windows 3.0. This new and improved version swiftly became a bestseller. Ultimately, OS/2 failed in the marketplace, leaving Microsoft with a virtual monopoly on operating systems for PCs. Now the Federal Trade Commission began looking at claims that Gates was using this dominance in operating systems to cut off competition by cutting prices on Microsoft products. It seemed Microsoft's mild-mannered chairman was gaining a seek and destroy image.
Bill Gates is not a brutal guy. He just needs to win. And he's willing to win, gracefully or non-gracefully. It doesn't matter. A win is still a win.
Predatory pricing was not the only charge leveled at Microsoft. In 1993, the Justice Department began a new investigation. Gates would have to face one of his most formidable opponents, the United States government. In 1993, Bill Gates and Microsoft were again under investigation by the U.S. Justice Department. They examined complaints that Microsoft was charging computer makers a licensing fee based on the number of computers they sold, including those computers not running Microsoft software.
They made computer manufacturers pay for the Microsoft software whether it was installed on their computer or not. And as a result of that, they prevented competitors from entering the market.
The Justice Department has charged Microsoft, the world's largest software company, with using unfair marketing and contracting practices.
In July of 1994, Microsoft agreed to stop charging the fees in question, and the Justice Department dropped the case. Gates would never admit that Microsoft had a monopoly, and maintained he was simply providing better software at lower prices.
I mean, we're not like an alligator. We don't go around and eat things. We come out with these little boxes, these nice little software packages, and you stick them in your computer, and you either have fun using it, and it helps you get things done, or not.
But it wasn't that simple for investors. The government probes and the fights with IBM and Apple caused the value of Microsoft stock to drop. There was now more pressure than ever to turn out the next version of Windows. Gates found some inventive ways to release the tension. He appeared in commercials for his company with Microsoft Top Gun Steve Ballmer. He sometimes made dramatic entrances to tout his company at software conventions, once arriving as Star Trek's Mr. Spock. Gates also instituted the microgames. This hodgepodge competition among the Microsofties is very reminiscent of the games he played as a child at the Hood Canal.
It was like summer camp for adults. We'd all go to his house, and he would spend months figuring out what the various games would be, and he would be sort of the master of ceremonies. He'd form us into teams, very carefully figuring out the dynamics of the teams and how we might all interact. And then we would have to do these like summer camp games. And I met Melinda first at one of those micro games.
Melinda was 28-year-old Melinda French, a Duke graduate with an MBA. She had been working as an executive at Microsoft for several years. It was becoming increasingly clear to Bill's family and friends that she was the woman that 37-year-old Gates had decided to spend his life with.
He dated Melinda for quite a while before they got married, and so I saw them together over the years, and they always looked like they had a very special thing going, you know, a level of intimacy and a level of intellectual connection that just caused sparks.
She's a really wonderful person, a perfect match for him. Very, very bright, very organized, very supportive, very interested in family and good family life.
Bill and Melinda were married in Hawaii on January 1st, 1994. The night before the ceremony, Bill had arranged for a special serenade for Melinda.
He had Willie Nelson play the night before his wedding, and it was a total surprise. Bill got up and he said, you know, I really love Melinda, and I really want to sing her some songs tonight, and I don't sing that well, and so I asked a friend of mine to come and do a little singing for us, and so it was a big surprise.
In Melinda, Bill found a partner who gave him the kind of personal happiness he'd been looking for, and who also understood the professional demands of his business. But only months after his marriage, the joy that Bill shared with his family would turn to heartbreak. His mother, Mary, who had been his most devoted ally, was diagnosed with breast cancer. She died in the early morning of June 10, 1994. Bill rushed home to be at his mother's side.
When he came to the house that night, he'd been stopped by the police on the way because he was speeding. And of course, the policeman recognized him. It wasn't the first time he ever got stopped for speeding, by the way. And they looked at him and they said, what's going on? Because he said, you know, I was sitting there and the tears were just running down my face. And the policeman said, well, he said to the policeman, I'm sorry, he said, my mother just died. The policeman said, well, you go ahead, you go on home, but please slow down a little bit if you don't mind. So he was very deeply affected by his mother's death, as we all were, of course.
In the years that followed, Bill would begin to pick up where his mother left off in creating a philanthropic foundation to serve major projects in health and education. But all of his wealth and power would not shield him from the crises he and Microsoft would face on the road ahead. By 1995, 39-year-old Bill Gates had settled into a new life as a married man. With his wife, Melinda, he took time off to explore the world from Africa to China. It seemed that Bill Gates now truly had it all.
This is a man so successful, his chauffeur is Ross Perot, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Dancers.
1995 was also a banner year for Microsoft. Windows 95 was introduced to great fanfare. Tonight's show host Jay Leno kicked off the ballyhoo for the new software.
Windows 95 is so easy, even a talk show host can figure it out.
Clearly, Gates was still Microsoft's best salesman. But from now on, it wouldn't be all business for the boss. On April 26, 1996, Bill and Melinda welcomed their first child, a daughter, Jennifer.
He just loves that little girl. It's just so marvelous to see. It's very gratifying to a father to see his own son have the same feeling about children that I did about him and his sisters. So it's really gratifying.
A year after his daughter's birth, Bill moved his family into a $54 million dream house. Along with family and guest quarters, there is a library housing the Leonardo da Vinci notebook, for which Gates paid more than $30 million. Even though the house serves many business functions, for the Gates family, it's just home.
It's a remarkably family-friendly home, given what it is. I remember the first time going there after it was fully finished, walking through it and seeing, little Tykes cars in various places and things like that. I mean, this is not an antiseptic home that you feel afraid to touch anything or sit anywhere.
As Bill Gates' personal life grew more fulfilling, his professional life grew more frustrating. By 1997, he found he was way behind in the exploding internet market. A company called Netscape was dominating sales of internet browsers, the software needed to access websites. Gates set out to close the gap by including Explorer, his browser, with every copy of Microsoft Windows. Many saw it as dirty pool, a move to eliminate his chief rival.
If Microsoft chooses to disadvantage Netscape or any other competitor, then the consumer doesn't get a fair choice. When the consumer doesn't get a fair choice, the market can't work effectively.
In 1998, Gates was called to the Senate, where he was once a page, and charged with running an illegal monopoly.
I hope that my testimony helps the court to resolve the issues in this case. That would be best for consumers and the industry, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
President Bill Clinton's Justice Department, along with 19 states, filed an antitrust suit against Microsoft. It was the largest suit of its kind in the history of the computer industry.
Microsoft has the power today to exercise predatory and exclusionary control over the very means by which we access this internet. It's a lot like General Motors having the ability to dictate what type of gasoline you put in your car, or what interstate you can drive on, or even how you get on the interstate.
In 2000, a federal judge ruled that the company would have to be split in two. After more than 2 decades of unstoppable success, this was a huge blow to Bill Gates.
The antitrust trial affected Bill Gates very deeply. He was very sensitive to the accusations that he was petulant, that he was arrogant, that he didn't answer all the questions fairly, that he was trying to be obstructive with prosecutors.
Rural town of about 400.
The antitrust suit lasted 4 years and cost Microsoft millions of dollars in legal fees. Ultimately, in 2002, the Justice Department, under President George Bush, offered Microsoft a favorable settlement. It would be an infuriating moment for Microsoft's detractors and a triumphant moment for Bill Gates and company. In the midst of the antitrust suit, Bill Gates surprised many when he stepped down as Microsoft CEO, dubbing himself chairman and chief software architect. The CEO job went to his old Harvard pal, Steve Ballmer.
They're old friends, and Gates really wanted to just be the ideas man. He really just wanted to take a step back, and that's what he did, and it's working very well now. So it was difficult for him to let go of his baby, but he got used to it.
For the last decade, Bill Gates has been on a mission to share his wealth. In 2000, he formed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year on computers, vaccines, and medicines for those who need them most.
The rich world and the poor world are so separated. The awareness of the crisis in AIDS and the very effective interventions that can take place is very, very low. The time is really now to change these things.
He has publicly stated that he will not be leaving his vast fortune to his children.
Well, what Bill Gates has said is that he's going to give away, before the end of his life, 90% of his fortune.
Bill Gates has become a global icon. His second book, Business at the Speed of Thought, was published in 25 languages and is available in more than 60 countries. In 2004, Forbes magazine rated him as the richest person in the world for the 11th consecutive year. His net worth, estimated at about $50 billion, leaves him some time to play, but not too much.
The industry keeps changing. I mean, it's the perfect game because it never ends. You can't sit down and relax.
Through it all, William Henry Gates III has remained the competitor he always was. Looking to the future, this visionary is investing much of his energy on expanding the Microsoft market into global territories like the Middle East and China. Meanwhile, Gates and Microsoft have set their sights to improve their software to battle against computer viruses and spam. Gates himself is said to receive 4 million spam emails per day. Whether he'll be remembered as a robber baron, a philanthropist, or the guy who simply built a better mousetrap, no one can deny he changed the way the world works and plays.
When the biographers and historians write the history of the 20th century, Bill Gates is going to go down as the best businessman of our century, and Microsoft is one of the greatest companies of the 20th century. It's remarkable what this company has managed to do in so short a time. This is one of the great success stories of the 20th century.